Hi everybody, this is Leonard here, and today we are going to show you a revised rendition of the Babi Cilli Garam recipe that I did a couple of weeks back. Not so much a problem, but the previous recipe tended to be focused on more of a healthier approach with the pork shoulder. I want to showcase to you how to use pork belly instead, which is the more traditional choice of pork really. So today we're going to use the air fryer to make a crispy pork belly version of Babi Cilli Garam. And there are three major things that I will cover in today's video on how to make any pork belly recipe in an air fryer really crispy and really delicious. So let's get started. So the first thing that we need to do with any pork belly recipe is learn how to prepare it so that it cooks up right. Now the first thing to note off is the way the fibers are aligned. You can see very quickly the fibers are going in this direction over here. And what we do want to do is to create slices that are against the grain. So for example, if I just cut in the middle right here, you can see this is a very good cross section of all the meat. Alright, now in terms of the fat, you can choose to kind of trim off some of the excess fat, which is something that I do sometimes. But in the case of an air fryer, you don't want to take out too much fat because you do need the fat to help crisp up later on. So once that's out of the way, I'm going to slice them against the grain. So again, against the grain, just like that. Nice slices like this. If I see a lot of fat, I will still trim that off as well. And the key thing is, if you are not marinating this for a long period overnight, it's really nice to just do a simple score, just like that. And that helps tenderize the pork belly furthermore. So this is technique number one. Prepare the pork belly, cut it through the cross section, and score it for additional tenderness. The next thing we're going to do is prepare the batter that this will basically fry in. And we're going to make a somewhat thick but still wet batter, and that will crisp up in the air fryer with the fat rendering out from the pork belly. So the first thing I'm going to do is a little bit of salt, just a little bit, because don't forget the chili garam is a bit salty. So we just want a little bit of salt just to season it through. That is essentially it. But what comes next is much more important. So what I have over here is basically rice flour with a bit of all-purpose flour in a 1-to-1 ratio. You can just use all-purpose flour and rice flour. I just happen to have this on standby for bread making, but this works as well. About a teaspoon over there. I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of cornstarch. Rice flour and cornstarch just makes it a bit more finer, the texture, and the batter a bit more crispy as well. Now the other thing that we're going to add is a bit of baking powder. Now if your baking powder isn't expired like mine, you can just dig it out very easily. But just a pinch just like that helps a lot. Now we're going to just mix this up, and you can see quite instantaneously it's quite dry. But that's okay, because we're going to add just a little bit of water. And I do mean just a little bit here. So you want just a bit of water so that it becomes more like a paste. Yeah? Okay. And now we are ready to fry in the air fryer in question. The second key point is to ensure your batter is at the right consistency for a crispy texture in the air fryer. Because in an air fryer, you don't have oil coating around a food item to cook it and create air bubbles through water and steam, you have to rely on other agents like baking powder or baking soda to create air, and that basically creates this very porous and brittle structure that lends a very nice crispy texture at the end. When it comes to the batter consistency for air frying, you want it to be slightly wetter than a typical dredge, but you don't want it to be as wet as a typical batter. You want there to be enough viscosity to hold its shape and form before dripping down to the tray. Now, the third thing that you gotta do to make good air fried pork belly is to preheat your air fryer over here. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the temperature dial. I'm gonna go to the highest temperature, and I'm gonna preheat this for 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes is more than enough to get the environment hot enough so that when you put your food in, the food temperature doesn't drop too drastically. So now that the oven has been preheated, we can actually, number one, get a bit of fat, and we can start layering the belly. Now, pork belly in itself has a lot of fat already, so we don't have to go crazy onto it, but we do want to put enough fat so that it just doesn't stick at the first part of cooking at the very least. So let's put it all there. And back in. We're going to cook this at 180 degrees for a good 8 minutes and see how it goes from there. We basically want it to be crispy enough, the batter to set, and the exterior to look a bit golden brown and delicious. Okay, so it's been about 8 minutes, and there you go. You can see the fat is oozing out from the belly itself, and that's exactly what we want. And you can see how the batter has become more like a dredge now, but it's still adhering to the meat in question, and that's exactly what we want. And the last blow, you just go higher temperature, just for 3 minutes. In addition to the third point that we've mentioned, when it comes to managing the air fryer or any other cooking vessel for that question, you kind of have to see and experience what's happening with the food and kind of learn how to adjust accordingly, right? So bear in mind that I don't use a lot of recipes, mainly because it's probably more educational if you have a more sensational experience with the food in question. If it looks underdone, okay, a bit more. If it looks overdone, well, you've screwed up. But learn that for the next time. So, sensational experience. So it's not been exactly 3 minutes, but I think it's more than enough because you can see a very nice browning texture here already. So by the way, I just did a very small amount of pork belly. You can obviously do way more than this. But here you go. Look at all that fat popping out. Really nice. And that is it, right? So this is the chili garam that we made in our previous episode. If you want to know how to make chili garam, please check out that video. We did a very deep dive on what is chili garam and how do you actually make chili garam. So into this bowl, I'm going to add a good teaspoon of chili garam. And I'm going to give this a stir. Stir. So, moment of truth. Come on, the one. So let's recap how to make great pork belly in an air fryer. Step 1, pork belly is a tough cut. You need to prepare it so that it's tender in the mouth. Cutting it against the grain and hatching it will help tenderize mechanically the cut, and that's going to be really important. The second thing is the batter consistency. Remember, it should be wetter than a dredge. In an air fryer, you need some form of liquid to create bubbles, and that's what makes a crispy product in an air fryer. But it shouldn't be as wet or as loose as a typical batter would be. And the third and most important thing is temperature control. Preheat your air fryer first and kind of like eyeball it, as you go along. But generally 8 to 10 minutes for this kind of amount. And is this better than the pork shoulder? Yes. I'll see you next time. Bye.